The morning sun had barely broken over the quiet neighborhood when David heard a sharp knock at his cabin door. Standing outside was Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, her arms crossed and her expression locked in arrogance. "You're not even in this HOA," she sneered. "But we're suing you anyway. You park your truck where our members can see it, and it lowers property values." Her words felt absurd, almost laughable, but David could tell from the thick folder in her hand that she was serious. David lived on the edge of the lake, outside their neighborhood, completely independent of HOA rules. Yet here she was, dragging him into her little empire. The audacity was almost comical, but the paperwork looked official. Neighbors peered out from their lawns, whispering. Karen loved an audience, and she knew how to stir drama. What Karen didn't know was that David wasn't just a quiet man with a lakeside cabin. He was a corporate attorney who had spent decades unraveling legal knots far more complicated than a suburban HOA's bylaws. The HOA was about to play a game they could never win, and David was already 3 steps ahead. The lawsuit papers arrived by courier the next day, stamped in bold red, "Violation of community standards." David chuckled as he flipped through the pages. They claimed his cabin obstructed HOA views of the lake. Though his property was private and predates the HOA by decades, he could see Karen's fingerprints all over this. Overreaching, dramatic, and desperate for control. Neighbors began stopping by, some apologizing for Karen's antics, others too afraid to cross her. "She fines us for everything," whispered Mrs. Green. "Paint colors, flower pots, even the type of curtains we use. You're the first one to ever push back." David sat at his desk, pen in hand, and began drafting his response. Not just a defense, but a counter. He knew something Karen didn't. The HOA had been operating under an outdated charter, one that technically expired years ago. All their fines, all their rules, legally meaningless. The lawsuit Karen had filed wasn't just weak. It was about to expose the HOA's entire house of cards. At the first court hearing, Karen marched in with a dramatic flair, flanked by 2 HOA board members like bodyguards. David arrived calmly, in a crisp suit, carrying only a single leather folder. Karen smirked, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is going to bankrupt him," but the judge barely got through introductions before David spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady. "Before we proceed, I must raise a preliminary matter. This HOA has no legal authority to sue anyone. Their charter expired 3 years ago." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Karen's smile faltered. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. David handed over the documents, straight from county records. The entire HOA had been operating without legal standing. Every fine, every threat, every lawsuit, they were void. Karen's face turned crimson. She sputtered, trying to argue, but the judge silenced her. The room shifted. For the first time, everyone realized Karen wasn't in control. David was. Back in the neighborhood, the news spread like wildfire. Residents whispered about what happened in court, disbelief mixing with a strange sense of relief. For years, Karen had ruled through fear. Endless fines, humiliating letters, constant threats of legal action. Now, her empire was crumbling in real time. David knew this was only the beginning. To dissolve an HOA completely required a vote. But here's what Karen hadn't counted on. Most of the residents wanted out. They were tired of paying fees, tired of the bullying, tired of Karen. David decided to accelerate the process. That weekend, he hosted a meeting on his property by the lake. Families came, some nervously, others hopeful. "She's taken so much from us," one father admitted. "But if what you say is true, we can finally be free." David explained the process simply, legally, and clearly. All it would take was a majority vote, and Karen wouldn't be able to stop it. Karen, of course, wasn't going down quietly. She stormed through the neighborhood, shouting at residents who attended David's meeting. "He's lying. He wants to steal your homes," she screamed, banging on doors, her face twisted with desperation. But the more she yelled, the more neighbors turned away. David, meanwhile, filed the paperwork to initiate the dissolution vote. Karen showed up at the county office the same day, waving her expired charter like a weapon, only to be met with blank stares. Legally, she was powerless. The HOA's foundation was gone, and everyone knew it. As the vote approached, Karen tried one last tactic: fear. She sent threatening emails claiming property values would collapse without her leadership. But the residents, now emboldened, ignored her. They had tasted the possibility of freedom, and nothing could scare them back into submission. The vote was held in the community center, the same room where Karen had once barked orders and humiliated her neighbors. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. Residents filed in, nodding politely to David, avoiding Karen's piercing glare. When the ballots were counted, the result was overwhelming. The HOA was dissolved. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her mouth open but no words coming out. Years of control vanished in minutes. Neighbors erupted into quiet cheers. Some even cried, not from sadness, but from sheer relief. For the first time in years, they felt free to live in their own homes without fear of punishment over trivial rules. David stood to the side, calm as ever. He hadn't sought power, only justice. In the days that followed, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Kids played in yards without parents worrying about noise complaints. Residents painted their homes the colors they wanted. Gardens flourished. The shadow of Karen's HOA had finally lifted. Karen, meanwhile, packed up her house in silence. No more threats, no more smirks. Just a woman who had built her identity on control, only to watch it slip through her fingers. David looked out at the lake one evening, watching the sun set across the water. He hadn't just won a legal case. He had restored freedom to an entire neighborhood. And in just 3 minutes of courtroom clarity, the mighty HOA had dissolved into history. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.